In his journal, he put down these words: arrived late afternoon, blinded by the sun on the water. Could have driven right off the edge into the sea. He parked the car and checked in at the guest house. His room overlooked the ocean. With the window left open, he could hear the softly spoken waves unfolding on the shore. And once he had unpacked, he went straight out to walk on the beach. There was nobody in sight. He had the entire coastline to himself. Everything so still, so empty, so big and wide and forever. The sun lit up the sky in what he referred to in his journal as a red heart, a pumping red heart over a pumping red ocean. It turned the houses in the village behind him pink and the mountains a kind of burgundy. The cliffs on the far side of the bay became a red bricked wall with ancient lines of distress left over from a time of great geological change.
So today we are at Books Upstairs, Ireland's fantastic independent bookshop in D'Lear Street, Dublin, talking to the writer Hugo Hamilton. And thanks so much to Books Upstairs for having us. Hugo is very well known for his fine novels, which include The Love Test, Headbanger, Sad Bastard, Hand in the Fire, The Pages, and for his short stories Dublin Where the Palm Trees Grow, and his two memoirs The Speckled People and The Sailor in the Wardrobe. And those of you who have read Hugo's books will know about The Speckled People. It was a bestseller, and it's a memoir of his German-Irish childhood in Dublin, growing up with his German mother and prohibited by his Gaeilgeoir father from speaking English. But today, Peter and I are here to chat to him about his new novel, Conversation with the Sea. It's published by Hachette. It has received high praise, including from PAUL LYNCH Booker winner, who said that it's a book of everything: love, family, home, war, migration, loss, at once and by turns, gentle and ferocious, luminous and dark, and ultimately filled with hope.
Thanks. And I'm also just remembering that because we did a previous interview many years ago with Hugo on the occasion of Surrogate City, so just to get that in as well.
Oh, and actually, if you're getting something in, Peter, sir,
yeah.
I would like to get in a story which Hugo might remember, because Hugo lived in Glenageary, and I grew up in Glenageary, and I was a teenager ferociously reading and loved writing, and one day I opened to the Irish Times and I saw a short story by you about a young couple eating pizza, I think in Pizza Stop, I could be wrong about this, and they did a runner and they didn't pay for it, and I went up to you in our local shop. I read the story, crossed the road, I don't know what I was buying, and I saw you standing there, and it took ferocious courage because it was the first writer I'd ever properly engaged with in a public place. So I went up to you and said, "Are you Hugo Hamilton?" And I suppose you were thinking, who's this teenager? And I said, "I've just read your story and I loved it." So there you go.
Oh, that's lovely to hear that. Yeah, I think they did it. It was a true story that it was based on, you know. So
really, did you do it, Hugo?
No, I mean, this couple that I was working with, this guy I was working with, they did that one day, and you know, he did. They both did a runner, and he got away, and she got caught, and so it's sort of. For me, it was kind of like a philosophical way that a lot of love stories end. You know, with her paying the price, you know.
And I loved it. And I loved that I just finished it and there you were. That's Ireland for you, isn't it?
That's
story
great,
and there's the writer in front of you.
So anyway, welcome to Books for Breakfast, Hugo. I mean, the first thing I should say is just congratulations on this novel. You know, I think it's very fine work, and we both greatly enjoyed reading it. I suppose, I mean, in some ways you could say it's kind of like a quiet, reflective sort of novel. I mean, a lot of the action takes place inside the main character's, Lucas's kind of head. But it's also a novel of many layers and dimensions, and we'll come to those maybe later. But I thought we might begin actually with the landscape, because it plays such a major kind of part in the book. It's set in what seems to be Achill, although it's just called the island, and it's where Lucas has come to talk to the sea, to have his conversations with the sea, to process his failed relationship and try to figure out what's next in his life. He's been here before with Katja, his now ex-partner, so I suppose it makes sense in a way that he should return here. But I'm just wondering, to begin with, what drew you to that particular landscape? Is it a part of the country that you know well? Does it have particular resonance for you?
Yes, it does. I mean, Achill Island I've been going to for many years now. I go there almost every year for the Heinrich Böll Festival. Heinrich Böll was this German writer, Nobel Prize-winning writer, who bought a little house on Achill Island, who described Achill Island in his legendary Irish journal, and brought thousands and thousands of German people to the island to verify all his descriptions and to see if the woman with the most beautiful feet in the world was still there, that kind of thing. So it's very much, part of the German-Irish story in a lot of ways. And I loved going there. Achill is one of the most wonderful places in the world. And I thought I'd often wanted to write a novel set there. And I think I tried it a couple of times, but this was the best way of telling it. This German person coming over from Berlin leaving his life. His life has become a disaster. And he's also facing a disaster in the world, which sort of coincides with his personal failures. I mean, we can all describe what's happening to the world at the moment, but that's all in his head at the same time.
He's a fantastic character, but I love Achill as well, and the cottage there, the Heinrich Böll cottage, is a fantastic place for writers to go there, isn't it? It's curated by John McHugh, I think.
That's right. It was left to the state by the Böll family. And it's a wonderful place for artists.
And I was wondering, reading the book as well, did you go back and read his famous book?
Yes, I did. I mean, I was a fan of Heinrich Böll. I got that book when I was 15 years of age. It was sent to us in Ireland by one of our aunts in Germany. And I read it and I thought, God, I'm reading my own story here. Yeah. This is my mother's story. And it so happens that he came from the same area of Germany, the Rhineland, as my mother. But he also had the same kind of romantic, almost nostalgic view of Ireland. Achill Island, at the time that Heinrich Böll arrived, had all the things that had gone missing in Germany. And so it was a kind of a nostalgic, return to a place in the world where and he could then describe it as basically this loss. It was a book addressed to the German people, like a series of postcards. A very fond description of Ireland. And
that kind of nostalgia fits into Lukas then, doesn't it? The nostalgia of him returning to where his honeymoon had once been,
That's right.
And he keeps referring, because he keeps referring, he refers to he doesn't call him by name, but he refers to him as the German writer with the beret.
With the beret.
From the ruined land.
But he thinks about him a lot. But the other thing, because journals and diaries are important to this book. I mean, it's Lukas's own journal, and he's a journal keeper, and it's a major part of, if you like, the machinery of the novel. And we see him writing in it all of the time, and we read what he's writing. I mean, he sits down at his breakfast table, and he's chatting to the landlady and so on. But he's also writing. He's recording his thoughts in his diary. And the diary or the journal becomes a kind of survival mechanism for him, doesn't it?
Yes, that's a good way of describing it. I mean, he's, as you say, he's carrying on what Heinrich Böll, the author, did in keeping the journal. But it's also it's a survival mechanism for him. And every psychologist will tell their clients, keep a diary. It's a way of overcoming your troubles. It's a way of seeing the world from the outside. You could also say, like, it's a way of conquering the world in a kind of a spiritual way. But for me, it was also a literary technique. It allows me to take a step backwards and not become this omniscient author. Mm-hmm. It becomes the story of Lukas and what he writes in his journal. So there isn't a question mark about how authentic this is or the author's making this up. There are always these problems with how do you believe an author when they write a story. This kind of eliminates that problem in some way, and it becomes this very true story of Lukas telling everything to his journal, you know.
Yeah, it's a very ingenious idea, that idea about the journal, I thought, but it links him also, it's linked also intricately with the father, isn't it? His father, Lukas's father, because Lukas's father gave it to him as a type of, as Peter said, survival or coping mechanism. But the father, his story, it's a horrific past, really, that is coming up out of it, and that past haunts the novel and it haunts Lukas, doesn't it? So, and it can't really be escaped. Without giving away too much, can you talk a little bit about that, about the father and Lukas and the dots?
Yeah, I suppose that's central to the to his trouble in many ways, and that's autobiographical as well. I'm a German with a German mother, so the German past has always affected me, and it's something that my generation had to deal with in a very open way. His father was a history professor, and he had a map of red dots on the wall of his office, and they haunted this character of Lukas. They turn out to be sites of mass murder in the Ukraine and Poland, which are now very well documented. In fact, there's an interactive map you can now access and find out what happened in each one of those locations. And during the Second World War, there had been a secret Nazi operation to erase those mass graves. And it's a bizarre kind of project. First of all, they had killed all these people, and now, in order to clean up the landscape, they were erasing all those locations. It's not a story that's very well known.
And they tried to erase the people who, in turn, were erasing
that's
evidence
right.
as well. I mean,
yes, yeah. So it becomes a kind of an impossible mission. How can you'd have to almost erase everybody, including the last person who erased those people. Yeah. So it's a kind of a testimony to the fact that memory will always survive, and no matter what atrocities are made in the world, there will always be some witness who will survive those.
And in a way, Lukas is a witness. His father gives him the journal, and he is a witness to it by writing in it. Yeah.
I mean, it's something you've said to me, because we're constantly reminded of history in the novel, and we're also, as you mentioned earlier, we're reminded also of kind of the contemporary violence. I mean, on the one hand, I'm thinking of the deserted village on the island itself. I mean, because that's a link. We're reminded of famine and exile, and the novel deals very movingly, I think, with exile. And there's a point in the landscape which is often referred to, which is that the place of last looking, the place that the emigrant sees last before they continue on their journey to America. That their last sight of home, that becomes crucial, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yes. I mean, that's also a true story I've been told, that there's a place on Achill when you're on the bus leaving, and so many emigrants took that bus. There's a place where the landscapes of Achill just suddenly disappears. And I was told that sometimes the bus stopped there for a moment to allow people to wave and sort of see their home for the last time. Because many of those emigrants from Achill left forever. They never had the chance to go back. I mean, there is a description of one emigrant who came back and then threw his suitcase out onto the sea. It was a sort of a symbol of it was like telling the world you were never going to emigrate again, you were never going to travel again. You threw the suitcase out. Yeah. And that was a reverse. I found that to be an extraordinary, I know that was an extraordinary image, but that thing of, after years of emigration and maybe the odd phone call, so people who knew their children through like occasional phone calls, and then finally after 30 years of working as a navvy or whatever, would come back, and then the first thing that would happen is empty the suitcase, walk down to the beach, and throw it in, like an extraordinary kind of gesture.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Yeah, it's a lovely story I've been told as well on Ackle.
It was beautiful. I think the novel is so visual, and I kept thinking about the suitcase afterwards. I loved it as an idea, and it's really sad as well. It was very moving. But war comes into it too, as Peter said earlier. You have Mira and Omar, the mother and son. We're not quite sure where they're from. I was guessing maybe Syria or Palestine. I wasn't sure, but and war also comes up because, as you said earlier, Lukas has left his wife behind in Berlin. That marriage seems to be breaking up, and the daughter behind. But there's something I want to ask you about the wife. And like Guernica comes into the novel, and she's taken students to see it, and something happens, and it affects her job. Can you just talk a little bit about like Guernica and how that came into the whole thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, his wife Katya is an art teacher, and so she's brought the students to see Guernica, the famous painting by Picasso, in Madrid. And two of the students take the opportunity to make a protest. They hold up a banner written in red paint, and she becomes implicated, as it's almost as though she had caused this, or sort of given permission to that protest, and she becomes cancelled. And that's kind of a very familiar story in Germany now. I've done in a sort of a literary way what's actually happening in Germany, this kind of repression of voices that are basically telling the truth about what's happening in the world.
She gets her job back also. It's almost like a moment of racism as well, or a moment of where they kind of set aside the protest because they say, well, we've got other things on our mind now. We've got all these immigrants that we have to kind of worry about.
That's right, yeah. The person who speaks up for her eventually at the tribunal says, look, what are we worrying about her for? The classes are already full with migrants, so can we not address the real subject?
Oh my God, you'd almost be saying, I don't want my job back at that point, wouldn't you? Yeah. You don't want the job back.
But just to go back, I mean, I do want to, I don't know, maybe you want to ask this, but it's just the question, one of the fascinating kind of groups of people in the novel are the surfers. I mean, he's staying in this guest house, and there's a bunch of surfers staying in the same place. And they're kind of a fascination because I suppose they represent freedom or joy or fearlessness or, I don't know, possibility, or a more kind of elemental life force or physical communion with nature. And Luke's kind of, he envies this, doesn't he? He's kind of, part of him wants to be a surfer. He even goes and buys a surfboard at one point.
Yes. I mean, that's right. They are the ultimate survivors. They have the art of standing up on waves, and and their lives are full of love and joy and all of those things. And he can't quite access that freedom that they have. And he, as you say, he does eventually buy a surfboard, but it doesn't work for him. He never actually gets to kind of go onto the waves.
There's one disastrous moment where he tries to give it to Omar as well, the young kind of survivor of...
Yeah, I mean, that's it's an attempt maybe to help. Omar is this refugee who's come from a war zone and wants to go back because he feels guilty about leaving his people behind. And Lukas at one stage tries to kind of keep him in Ireland, keep him safe, and offers him the surfboard. And this Omar, who's come from this disaster zone, says, what are you giving me a surfboard for? My people need water. Their homes are ruined. So it becomes this disastrous attempt to kind of help the world.
It's we're coming to the end of our conversation with you, but just to say, always throughout there's Lukas conversing with the sea. I mean, there's so much going on. We spoke very briefly there about the red dots and exile and homelessness. There's also the women on the truck, which a photo of the women on the truck, which again is very moving as well. But we don't want to give away all the book to you. We want you to go out and buy it, because for me and for Peter, it was one of the best books we've read in recent months. So we're delighted to have been conversing about Lukas, but also also conversing with you, Hugo Hamilton. His book is Conversation with the Sea, recently published by Hachette. Do go out and get it. And many thanks to Hugo Hamilton for coming into the breakfast table. And all details of your book will be on www.booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. Thanks, Hugo.
Thank you very much.
I think we've reached the end of our Books for Breakfast podcast this morning. I'm definitely rushing off to have more coffee. And I'm Enda Wiley, and I have Peter Sir here with me. And Peter, would you like to tell everyone about the details of the podcast if they'd like to listen again?
Well, you can subscribe at all the usual sources, Google and Apple and so on. And if you want to check out the notes that go along with this podcast, you can go to booksforbreakfast.buzzsprout.com. And so
we'll be back again. We'll have the toast on, we'll have the kettle boiling, we will have more books to discuss, and we're looking forward to having you here. So goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye.